Hello and welcome to Frags and Beer Radio Live. I'm your host, Trevor, also known as Zamot, online and gaming and a lot of other forums. So this is our geek radio sort of talk show where I cover whatever I saw in the news this week, geek related, pop culture related. I also usually go over my comic book pull list. I like to share the positive things I found there's going to be some negative stuff that's going to come up. It's going to come up tonight. But I also like to share some of the positive things that I find in comic books and other geekery things that I think you might be interested in, or at least point some things out that you may not know about that might give you more enjoyment out of all the wonderful things that make up geekology, or this what I call the study of geekery. I don't doubt I coined that phrase, but that's what I call what I do. That's what I call what I write, and because I cover so many different things on my websites and streams, that's sort of what I'm looking at. As far as gaming goes, recently the Division 2 released. I tried to stream that for you guys last Saturday, and if you were there or you saw any of my posts about it, my computer's too old. So you actually are going to start seeing, unfortunately, I'm going to have to put the hat out there. I've been tossing around the idea for a while now of whether I should, I closed down my Patreon for two reasons. A, I didn't have many patrons, and B, I didn't like how Patreon was treating the people who were using its platform. I didn't like its move toward shutting down people whose views it didn't like and all that other stuff. So I shut that down, and then I tossed around the idea of monetizing videos, but I really don't like ads. I don't like the idea of ads on my videos. I don't want you guys to have to look at ads to watch my videos, and I don't like platforms like YouTube or any other platform to have control of my content, because they could say, well, we'll just demonetize your video or we'll pull your ads or whatever. So I'm trying to avoid that, and I decided to start a Subscribe Star an account. I'm still waiting for it to get approved. Hey, how's it going, buddy? I can see you, Beachubs over there on YouTube. Thank you. This is I'm not sure if you've been on for our sort of podcast show. This is where I talk about what's going on in the geek sphere. I don't know how much of that you heard, but this is a little different than our game streams. Send some sparks. I don't know what Mixer's doing. Anyway, this is just a little different than our normal game streams. It's going to be a shorter stream. We're going to talk about a few things. But anyway, like I was saying, I got a Subscribe Star account. I do need a new computer. I can't really afford to drop the money on a new computer right now because we also need things for the house that we moved into a little over a year ago. So anyway, as soon as that Subscribe Star link gets that account gets finished up, I'll be sharing the links out there. I'll be, if you guys want to subscribe to content, if you want to subscribe to my channel, help fund getting new equipment for the studio, things like that. So hopefully that will all come through soon, and we can figure all that out. So anyway, speaking of gaming, Division 2 dropped. I'm really enjoying the Division 2. I wanted to stream it, but I can't. Computer's just not up to snuff for streaming the Division 2. The game is really good so far anyway. I haven't played a ton of it yet. I think I've got about 6 hours in, but it's very much like the original Division, which I enjoyed the Division, but my main problem I had with the Division was a lot of missions and side missions were very repetitive. It was the same thing over and over again. You went off to say there was like 3 or 4 different missions, and they just kept repeating over and over again, just in different locations. So the only thing that was unique about each mission was where it was located in the city. The Division 2 has given you more reason to go do those repetitive missions, and so far anyway, they seem less repetitive. I haven't played them all yet. I may find halfway through the game, like I did the last time, that it's just grinding the same content over and over again. We'll see, but at least there's more of a reason to do them. About halfway through the Division, I realized that I didn't even need to do the side missions. There was no point to them, so I stopped doing them. I just went directly to the story missions and played those out to the end of the game. I just stopped doing all the little collection things and all of the little not all those little bitty missions, just pointless. Anyway, Division 2 seems to be handling that a lot better. They've added a lot more features to the game, a lot more reason to take your time playing it and experience more of the game. So far, enjoying it. I really like it. If you guys like that style of game, check it out. I think you might enjoy The Division 2, especially if you like the original or if you liked games like Ghost Recon Wildlands, which I also enjoyed. If you like those type of games, I think you will enjoy The Division 2. So now on to, we don't have a whole lot of other news to talk about. We do have some comic book stuff to talk about. So first we're going to start with we're going to start with the bad and the ugly. Unfortunately, I get free books from my comic guy every so often. Stuff gets sent to him. He knows I'm always looking for new things. He knows I'm always interested in new titles. I also think he's trying to get me back on board with Marvel because he knows how hard it was for me to leave Marvel Comics a couple years back. I've been a Marvel collector since I was a kid. It's all I ever collected. A couple years ago, I made the choice to stop collecting Marvel for various reasons. Mainly, stories started really falling off. Art quality started going down the crapper. The staff, the artists and writers on social media were they were jerks. Some of them, they were really awful to fans, which I couldn't stand seeing. And so I dropped Marvel Comics, but he throws some stuff in my box sometimes when they come to him. So the first thing I got was I got a copy of Invaders #3. It's got Namor, Captain America, and Winter Soldier in it. Quite frankly, I flipped through it. I read some of the pages. I have no idea what's going on, obviously, because I haven't read the first part of this story, and I never really cared for Namor. He's not really one of those characters that I ever was interested in. So in this book, I don't know, Namor's a bad guy and Captain America is trying to stop him from creating some super weapon or something. I don't know. Quite honestly, I wasn't that interested. The art's okay. It's not terrible, but it's not. We've seen better. And the storyline, I can't comment too much on. The dialogue's all right. I can't comment too much on the story because, again, I don't know what's going on. But if you're into these books, but the main thing that I want to point out is, see that top banner there? That War of the Realms is coming in a week. We're going to talk about that in a second. The other title that I got, this was interesting. I thought it was actually one of their preview magazines at first. I didn't realize Marvel Comics was doing Marvel Comics Presents again. I used to read Marvel Comics Presents from time to time because they were sort of like standalone stories. They were more like a what if. They weren't part of the normal continuity of the characters' storylines, and they were usually they were very short, sometimes only one issue. In this case, it's this issue has 3 different shorts in it with Wolverine, Spider-Man, and Captain America, and they were actually pretty good. I do have to say the art in all 3 of the books was really good. The storylines in all 3 of them were pretty good. I'd have to say, surprisingly, a pretty good book from Marvel. I was impressed that they put. The only thing I didn't care for was how they draw Wolverine. Now, Wolverine's probably my favorite character in all of Marvel, and they kind of draw Wolverine like a pretty boy, like a Hollywood pretty boy, and I didn't much care for that. That's really the only part that I didn't dig, but it's not a bad book. Now, to the part that frustrates me with Marvel, and first of all, I wanted to point out something that they're doing, these Marvel Comics recently. Let me see if I can find it. So I don't know if you've seen going around these Stan Lee soapboxes, these old articles from Stan Lee that he put in comic books quite some time back. It was sort of like his sounding board, or his little soapbox, which it's called Stan's soapbox. And it's interesting that they're putting these in here because there's the debate about Marvel and DC and whether the comic books have become too political. And to set the record straight for what people think of when they say the comic books have gotten too political, they don't mean that comic books shouldn't be talking about social issues or that comic books shouldn't be handling politics. Nobody who reads comic books believes that comic books should be completely apolitical. Comic books have always touched on the social issues of the time. They have always touched on the politics of the time. What they've always done in the past, though, is they've done it smartly. They've done the stories have always been well written. They've been clever. The characters have handled those issues the way those characters would handle those issues. And what has become more common recently is writers are handling those issues the way they would and using the characters as their sounding boards. Rather than writing Captain America as, Captain America has always been sort of an old-fashioned, relatively conservative, but also liberal. Like, he's got a very liberal mindset when it comes to how everybody should be treated, forward-thinking on social issues like race and gender and class and things like that. He's very much, everybody should have equal opportunity to do the things they want to do in their lives. Everybody should be able to participate in the American dream, which isn't necessarily exclusively a liberal idea. But Captain America has always also been very conservative when it comes to defending the Constitution, sticking to the way America was meant to be, very much core American values, traditional American values. Well, when a writer takes Captain America and twists those things so that the writer can say what the writer wants to say about a particular social issue, that's what people have a problem with. People have a problem with lazy writing. They have a problem with comic books touching on pointless social media spats. Like when a writer has a problem with a particular group of people on Twitter and they decide to insert their own comments into the comic book. See Thor when Thor said it's about ethics and hammer swinging or whatever the hell that writer put in that book. That was taking a Twitter spat. That was taking a stupid social media exchange that happened in a very small piece of time and putting it in a comic book that presumably will be read 15 or 20 years from now. And somebody reading that 20 years from now is going to read that panel and not understand what the hell it means because it's pointless. It has nothing to do with the character, has nothing to do with the story. It's the writer inserting their own personal spat into a comic book. That's what people have a problem with. Now, I personally believe that Stan Lee would agree with that. He would have a problem with writers doing that. But they shared this soapbox. I'm going to read it to you real quick. It's not very long, so give me a second here. And I'm going to let you decide what you think they put this in here for. I think I know why they put this in here, and I don't like to make assumptions or guess, but in the entire light of everything that's going on, this may make sense. So, Stan Lee wrote this back in September 1967. Many keepers of the faith, meaning the people who believe in Marvel Comics, keepers of the faith have demanded that we take a more definite, interesting word, a more definite stand on current problems such as Vietnam, civil rights, and the increase in crime, to name a few. We've a hunch that most Marvel madmen pretty well know where we stand on such matters, and we've long believed that our first duty is to entertain rather than editorialize. Of course, you've probably noticed that it's not too easy to keep our own convictions out of the soul-stirring sagas we toss at you, but in our own bumbling fashion we do try. Anyway, since it's you who are the true editors of Marveldom, it's time for another impassioned poll. Should we editorialize more or less, or keep things in their present fouled-up form? We'll announce the verdict as soon as one of us learns to count so we can tabulate the votes. But till then, in case you haven't noticed, we've got a little suggestion for you, namely, think Marvel. That's it, believer. So, Stan Lee, and this is back in 1960s, Stan Lee was writing, and all those guys were writing comic books and touching on social issues, whether it be Black Panther and the KKK or X-Men, you know, being sort of an unintended but true allegory to the civil rights movement. They were touching on those issues in those books, but they were doing so in such a manner that it made sense to the story, and it was a good story to read. And in here, he's saying that it's their first priority to entertain. And he also says it's up to the reader to determine what the reader wants to see in Marvel Comics. It's not up to the writer or the artist or the editor what should be in Marvel Comics. Those guys decide the stories they want to tell, but ultimately it's the fans that decide the stories that they want to see and that should continue being seen. Stan firmly believed that the people buying the comic books had the final say. And I'll say it again, I'll repeat it right here where he says, "It's you who are the true editors of Marveldom." Stan Lee believed that the fans who were buying his books had the final say in what Marvel Comics should be doing. So when people who buy Marvel Comics have a problem with the way the comics are done, and then the Marvel writers and editors and artists turn around and defame those fans and call them names and treat them like garbage, that was very against what Stan Lee stood for. So I know they put this in here thinking that it's their way of saying, well, look, even Stan Lee said that politics gets into comic books. Yes, politics gets into comic books. We get that. But you should be using the characters, the way they were written and the way they were designed to tell the stories they would tell touching on those issues, not the stories you would tell touching on those issues. You're not putting yourself in the comic book. That's not how this should work. So, I mean, if you want to do that, by all means, go to a creator-owned comic like Image or Alterna and write the comic book the way you want to write it with your characters. These aren't your characters. That's the bottom line. These are not your characters. You're borrowing these characters for the period of time you're writing them. And then you have to give them back. Somebody else has to come along and borrow that character and write them. And if you screw these characters up, the next person's job is harder. You have violated your trust when you screw these characters up because they're not yours. Now, it sucks. That's the way Marvel Comics works. They're not creator-owned. But at the end of the day, these are not your characters. So, follow the words of Stan. The fans are the ultimate editors of Marveldom. The fans are the ones that decide what gets to go out there and what doesn't. And mainly we decide that by not buying them. Hence, I have not given Marvel Comics a dime in about 3 years now. Because I have decided that I don't like what Marvel Comics is doing. Just the way it works. So anyway, the other part that's frustrating for me is, so War of the Realms. I read through this thing so I could kind of figure out what this is coming. And you know, this reminded me of the same book that came out when Secret Wars came out. And I had the same feeling when I was flipping through this. So if you don't remember, or if you weren't collecting comics at the time, Marvel Comics went through a sort of crossover war in the 90s. That drove a lot of people away. It got to where you had to collect so many books every month to keep up with a story that it wasn't feasible. People didn't have the money. Kids, especially young people, were buying comic books, and you couldn't afford to buy more than 1 or 2 comic books a month with your allowance. But then they were like, well, you buy these 10 books so you can keep up on the story. There's no kids out there that can afford to buy 10 books, and now it's even worse. There's some adults that can't afford 10 comic books a month right now. So when I saw this War of the Realms, apparently this is all of the realms that, you know, if you're not familiar, you know, the mythological realms that are set out by the Asgardians. You know, you've got Asgard and Svartalheim and Alfheim and Midgard, which is Earth, and all the different realms are at war. And all the... Damn dog. And all the different heroes are fighting on one side of the war, and then there's villains on the other side of the war, and it's this huge crossover event, which people are getting tired of. The retailers have even told Marvel Comics, people are tired of this. The fans are tired of buying so many books just to keep up with a story. These earth-shaking events and these huge crossover things. it's frustrating to say the least. And just when I'm thinking like, ooh, I might be able to find something in Marvel that might interest me again, I see this and I realize why I'm not interested in Marvel. The other thing I see is like, what is this catered? Like, I've seen the art for Squirrel Girl online, and sometimes it's hard to believe. But come on, who is this catering to? Is this a children's book? Is Squirrel Girl a children's book? If Squirrel Girl is a children's comic, okay. This looks like it was drawn by somebody who does, you know, like cartoons in the middle of the day for Cartoon Network for like 8-year-olds. Is that what Squirrel Girl is? Is that your target audience? I don't know. I didn't think so, but I'm sorry. I don't want to like really trash somebody for their art, but it's not good. It's really not good. Oh, sorry, I had to get some drink. So anyway, I flipped through this book to see what was going on with the War of the Realms, and as I guessed, it's like, let's get every hero together. You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of, remember if you were a kid and you had a ton of action figures when you were younger. Like I had a ton of G.I. Joes and Star Wars figures and He-Man figures and everything, and every once in a while we would just get bored and be like, let's just set up the biggest war we could. Me and my brother, you know, we'd sit on our bedroom floor and we'd get all of them out, and the whole room would just be filled with action figures all over the place, you know, and then we would just make up this giant war and figure out who did it. That's what this reminds me of. Let's take every character in the Marvel Universe and let's just pit them against all this and just make this big, stupid war that at the end of the day isn't going to mean anything, just so we can sell a crap load of comic books, because we know how collectors are. We know that collectors feel like they have to buy everything because that's what collectors do. So in case you were wondering or you don't know, this is the list of all the issues. You can see my notes there in the middle. This is all the books that you have to buy to know what the hell is going on with this crossover, with this event. I counted, it's 62 books in this whole thing. 62 comic books you would have to buy to follow the War of the Realms. And if each one of them costs $3.99, I rounded it up to $4. Now I know some of them are going to be more than that. If they were each $4, that would cost you $248 to keep up. $248 worth of comic books for this event. That's what Marvel Comics is doing. So that's one more reason why I don't care. They aren't getting me back. But I wanted you guys to know what's going on in case you are looking at Marvel Comics, in case you didn't get that War of the Realms preview. Ask your comic shop. They got some free ones. They may have handed it out to you. If not, they may have one you can look at. There's a crap load of comic books in this crossover. It's up to you if you want to buy them. That was what frustrated me the most, especially when the crossovers went into titles I didn't read. I almost exclusively, good Lord, I can't talk this morning, today. I almost exclusively read X titles and Spider-Man. So when Marvel would do a huge crossover and they're like, well, next week you've got to buy, X-Men and X-Factor and X-Force, I was like, fine. And then they were like, oh, and you've got to buy, this title you've never heard of to get part 4 of this story. It's like, why? Why would you do that to somebody like me at the time, high school kid? You know, I had my allowance, I had my job, but a lot of that money was going into my car and my insurance and everything else. Why would you do that? And that actually reminds me, speaking of the number of titles, do you know how many Spider-Man titles there are? This is what kills me about Marvel right now. It's where'd it go? All of the Spider-Man titles, there's Star Wars. I'm not going to be able to find it. Here we go. So all of the Spider-Man titles that you've got out there, you've got Marvel Tales Spider-Man, you've got Spider-Man Annual coming, you've got The Amazing Spider-Man, which Spider-Man is like 2 issues a month for Amazing. You've got Symbiote Spider-Man, you've got Spider-Man Life Story coming out, you've got Miles Morales' Spider-Man, Marvel Spider-Man City at War, Spider-Gwen, Ghost Spider, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, 2 issues of that coming. Spider-Man Reptilian Rage. If you were a Spider-Man fan, holy crap. How would you even know what's going on unless you bought a dozen books every month? That's insane. So one of the things that I've gone to, and so we're going to talk about the good stuff now because I want to talk about the good stuff. Unfortunately, I'm not getting as many comic books as I used to get, so I only have one good one to talk about this week, but it's Isola. I've got my next issue of Isola. If you remember, a few weeks ago, I had the trade paperback with the first 5 issues. I think it was 5. What issue is this? Is this 7? Might have been the first 6 issues. Where's the issue number? 7, yeah. So the first 6 issues were in the trade paperback. I read it and I loved it. And now here's the next issue. First of all, love the cover. The cover, I don't know if you can see it very well, but see the background of the cover is a map for the world that this is set in. This is probably the best fantasy comic I've read next to Rose. I really enjoyed Rose, if you guys remember that, talking about that. This one is freaking fantastic too. The art in it is wonderful. I love the art. I love the storyline. And I love the world building. Let's see if I can find you a good set of panels to look at when it comes to the art. The world building in this book. Oh, I know what panel I want to find. I know there's no character. Where'd it go? No, here we go. There's some character drawing. Look at the art. It's very unique. The storyline is awesome. The world building is wonderful. I really want to know. I want to know more about this world, which is really cool because a lot of times with a comic book, you're getting the story of the characters and then the encapsulation of the comic, and that's good, but you don't really care too much about the rest of it. You don't want to know the rest. Like a lot of times you only care about the characters. You don't give a crap about the rest of it. In this case, I want to know more about this world. I'd actually love to read this in a novelized form because I want to know more about what's going on outside the lives of the couple of characters that we're reading about in the issue. So I'm really hoping this keeps going. This is from Image. Image is one of the companies that I buy a lot of because they are creator owned, because the books are usually encapsulated stories, meaning that you have a reason to give a crap because you know that these stories aren't going to go on forever. Where when you buy a Wolverine comic, you know Wolverine's going to go on forever because he's gone on forever and he's never going to die. Even when he dies, they're going to keep bringing him back. So when Wolverine's in trouble, you don't really care. Like, who cares? Wolverine is going to get shot into the sun next week. He'll be back the week after that. You don't really give a crap. In these books, because you don't know how long this is going to last. You don't know when it's going to end or where it's going to end. You know, when these characters are in danger, you have more of a sense of true danger with these characters because they could be killed off and you wouldn't know any different because there's no precedent. There's no, Isola kills off every other character every week and they come back. You just don't know that because it doesn't happen. Oh yeah, didn't know that, Beachum. So and over on YouTube, he's saying in Russia, Marvel and DC is not as popular like it is here in the U.S. And comic book culture is a little foreign for them. That's not such a bad thing. I wish you guys had more comic books. That would be great because they're such a great way to get literature or to get reading in a small pieces. A lot of people, especially if you don't have a lot of time, if you have a full-time job and you got a family or you've got school, you got a lot of things going on, you may not have time to sit down and read novels. But comic books are a good way to get that reading in, to also get some art in small pieces and parts, and then still get a good story and a good experience. I know that some places ship Image Comics. You can always look at Alternate Comics. I don't know what their international shipping or distribution is like, but you never know. Comic books are a great way to get that out there. But if you're interested in any, I would highly recommend Image, Dark Horse, Alterna Comics. There's a couple of the smaller Titan comics I get stuff from, also from Atlantic, and the one right out of my head, who does Blake Northcutt's books? Aspen Comics. Aspen Comics does some really good stuff too. So anyway, that's about it for our show. Thank you guys for joining me, Beachubs, and everybody else who joined on Mixer and Twitch and YouTube. I really appreciate it. Keep an eye on the Twitter account at TJ Bierschbach or at Frags and Beer. As soon as I have that Subscribe Star account up, I'll throw up a link. I'll give you guys, I'm going to work on a goal because we do need a new computer for streaming, and that's really going to be the test on whether my content is good enough that you guys want to keep seeing it, because we're about to come to the point where I will not be able to continue streaming modern games, because they're just, like, I can still play Division 2, but I can't play it and stream it at the same time. So I want to get back to being able to stream live new games, and in order to do that, I'm going to have to upgrade. It's going to be a pretty, I mean, it's not going to be super expensive, but it's going to be a little more expensive than I'm used to paying for a new computer. So anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. There won't be a stream tomorrow. I have a book signing and show, so I may try to get some Kingmaker in on Sunday. So watch that. Saturday randomness may be rescheduled for Sunday. Anyway, I will be back Monday afternoon for Monday Night Classics with more Final Fantasy III. And thank you guys so much for joining me, everybody. I really appreciate it. If you're watching the live, or if you're watching the recording, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share it out there. Make sure everybody sees it. And I will see you guys next time. You have a great rest of your evening and weekend until unless I see you on Monday. Thank you. Good night.